The silent observers. The Arxan Empire's warships cast long shadows across the stars of the Orion Arm, their crystalline hulls refracting starlight in mesmerizing patterns. For 3 centuries, they had expanded without resistance, consuming civilization after civilization. The Coalition of Free Worlds, a desperate alliance of 17 species, had spent the last decade trying to halt their advance. They had failed. Admiral Senna Voss of the Human Defense Force watched the tactical displays from Earth's orbital command station. Her dark eyes reflected the holographic movements of ships across the galaxy, each light representing thousands of lives. The Coalition's latest defeat at the Rigel Corridor had cost them 30% of their remaining fleet. "They still haven't requested our help," said General Chen, his weathered face illuminated by the tactical display. "Pride, perhaps. Or they still don't trust us." Voss nodded slowly. Humanity had joined the Coalition 50 years ago, but they had maintained a peculiar position. They contributed technology, medical aid, and resources, but never military forces. The older species viewed humans as clever but primitive, useful for their innovation, but not to be relied upon in battle. If they only knew. "The Arxan are getting cocky," Voss said, studying the enemy fleet movements. "They're not even trying to hide their tactical patterns anymore. They think they've won." The truth was, humanity had spent these 50 years watching, learning, and preparing. Every Arxan battle, every victory, every defeat, all of it analyzed by quantum computers and tactical AIs. While the Coalition threw themselves against the Arxan's superior numbers and technology, humanity had been developing countermeasures, testing theories, and building a fleet unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. The command center's atmosphere was tense but controlled. Unlike the chaos that often pervaded Coalition command centers, the human facility operated with precise efficiency. Officers moved between stations with purpose, their augmented reality interfaces streaming constant data to their neural links. Latest intelligence from the Proxima observers. A young lieutenant reported. "The Arxan are preparing for their final push. They're gathering their forces at the Deneb Junction." Voss exchanged looks with General Chen. The Deneb Junction was the last major staging area before Earth's sector. The Arxan didn't know it, but they were about to make their final mistake. "Send word to the Ghost Fleet," Voss ordered. "Begin Phase 1 deployment. And contact the Coalition Supreme Command. Tell them." She paused, a slight smile crossing her face. "Tell them humanity is ready to take a more active role in the war effort. In the depths of Jupiter's atmosphere, hidden by storms that had raged for millennia, humanity's true fleet stirred to life. Ships that defied conventional design philosophy, crews enhanced by neural interfaces and advanced AI support systems, weapons that had never been tested in actual combat but had been simulated millions of times against every known Arxan tactic. The Coalition's diplomatic liaison, a tall, ethereal being named Zenfor, arrived at the command center hours later. His species, the Ilari, had once been among the most powerful in the galaxy. Now they were refugees, their homeworld a crystalline monument to Arxan victory. "Admiral Voss," Zenthor's translated voice carried a note of desperation. "The Coalition Supreme Command has received your message. They are skeptical of what humanity could contribute at this late stage." Voss gestured to a nearby display, bringing up detailed scans of the Arxan fleet. "The Arxan's crystalline hull technology, it has a resonance frequency. Their formations, they follow predictable patterns based on their hierarchical society. Their targeting systems have a processing delay of 0.3 seconds. We know everything about them, Zenfor. We've been studying them for 50 years while they thought we were just hiding." The alien diplomat's large eyes widened slightly. "You mean?" "We haven't been staying out of the war because we're weak," General Chen interrupted. "We've been staying out because we needed to understand our enemy completely before we struck. And now we're ready." "The Coalition has lost hope," Voss said softly. "They think the war is over. The Arxan think it's over. That's exactly what we've been waiting for. Give us 5 hours after they launch their final attack. Just 5 hours. Zenthor's translator was silent for a long moment. When it spoke again, there was a mixture of disbelief and desperate hope in its synthetic voice. 5 hours. The Arxen have never been defeated in a battle lasting less than weeks. They've never fought humanity before, Voss replied. Contact your command. Tell them to hold their positions, protect their civilian populations, and watch what happens. The real war is about to begin. As Zenthor departed, Voss turned back to the tactical display. Across the solar system, humanity's ghost fleet was taking position. Ships with stealth systems beyond anything the Arxen could detect. Weapon systems that had been designed specifically to exploit weaknesses no one else had noticed. Crews who had trained against simulated Arxen tactics for years. Send the final authorization, she ordered. All ships, execute Operation Looking Glass. The greatest deception in galactic history was about to be revealed. Humanity hadn't been hiding from the war. They had been preparing to end it. Breaking point. The Arxen attack began exactly as humanity's simulations had predicted. Their crystalline ships emerged from hyperspace in perfect geometric formations, a display of power meant to demoralize their enemies before the first shot was fired. The Coalition's remaining forces, barely a quarter of their original strength, moved to defensive positions around their core worlds. Supreme Commander Crix of the Arxen Empire watched with cold satisfaction. His species had evolved in the crystalline caves of their homeworld, and they had built their empire on the same principles of geometric perfection. Every conquest added to their perfect pattern. Every victory proved the superiority of their ordered existence over the chaos of other species. The Coalition defense is pathetic, his second-in-command observed. They don't even have enough ships to form a proper containment grid. Crix's crystalline features shifted in what passed for a smile among his kind. They finally understand the futility of resistance. Begin the attack pattern. Standard efficiency protocols. The Arxen fleet moved forward with mathematical precision. Their weapons, powered by crystalline matrices that focused energy into devastating beams, began to tear through the Coalition's defensive lines. It was not a battle. It was an extermination. But in the shadows of gas giants and asteroid fields, humanity's ghost fleet waited. Admiral Voss stood on her command deck, watching the Arxen advance. Every ship in her fleet was equipped with quantum-entangled communications, allowing for instantaneous coordination without detectable signals. They're exactly where we want them, she said quietly. Execute Phase 2. Across the battlefield, hidden human ships activated their specialized weapon systems. The result of 50 years of research into Arxen technology was about to be demonstrated. The first sign that something was wrong came when 3 Arxen dreadnoughts suddenly shattered into billions of crystalline fragments. There had been no weapons fire, no explosion. They simply broke apart as if their molecular structure had been compromised. What happened? Crix demanded, his perfect composure cracking for the first time. Where did those shots come from? But there had been no shots. Human scientists had discovered that Arxen crystalline technology, for all its strength, had a fatal weakness. At certain frequencies, it could be made to resonate until it literally shook itself apart. The human fleet had deployed acoustic weapons specifically designed to exploit this weakness. Coalition forces watched in amazement as more Arxen ships began to disintegrate. The perfect formations that had been their strength became their weakness, as the resonance cascaded from ship to ship. Multiple targets breaking formation, reported a human tactical officer. They're attempting to regroup into defensive patterns. Voss nodded. They're following their programming. Predictable. Launch the swarms. From the human ships emerged clouds of microdrones, each barely larger than a human hand. The Arxen's defensive systems, designed to track and target capital ships, couldn't effectively engage such small threats. The drones attached themselves to Arxen hull plates, using targeted resonance fields to create gaps in their crystalline armor. Impossible, Crix whispered as reports of catastrophic failures flooded his command center. They're primitives. They barely have interstellar flight. They can't. His words were cut off as his own flagship systems began to fail. Through the gaps created by the microdrones, specially designed quantum viruses were infiltrating the Arxen's crystalline computer systems. The viruses had been crafted to exploit the rigid, predictable nature of Arxen programming. Within 2 hours of humanity's first strike, the mighty Arxen fleet was in chaos. Their perfect formations had been shattered, their communications were compromised, and their legendary crystalline technology was being turned against them. Xanthor, watching from the Coalition Command Center, could barely comprehend what he was seeing. How? He asked the human liaison officer. How did you develop these weapons? We studied them, the officer replied simply. While everyone else was trying to match their strength, we looked for their weaknesses. The Arxen are powerful, but they're inflexible. They can't adapt quickly to new threats. They never had to. The battle continued to unfold according to humanity's carefully crafted plan. The Arxen's attempts to counter the human attacks were predicted and countered before they could be implemented. Every contingency had been simulated, every response calculated. As the third hour began, Admiral Voss gave the order for Phase 3. The Ghost Fleet decloaked, revealing ships unlike anything the galaxy had seen. They were not the gleaming, geometric shapes favored by the Coalition and Arxen, but dark, asymmetrical vessels that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Now they see us, Voss said. Now they understand. The human ships moved with a fluidity that defied conventional space combat doctrine. Their crews, enhanced by neural interfaces and supported by AI tactical systems, could react faster than any organic pilot. Their weapons were not the standard energy beams or projectiles, but exotic instruments of warfare specifically designed to exploit Arxen vulnerabilities. Supreme Commander Crix watched his empire's greatest fleet disintegrate around him. The perfect pattern he had spent his life serving was being torn apart by these unpredictable, asymmetrical humans. In desperation, he ordered his remaining ships to retreat and regroup. But humanity had predicted this too. Hidden hyperspace inhibitors activated, trapping the Arxen fleet in normal space. There would be no retreat, no regrouping, no chance to adapt their tactics. Send the message, Voss ordered. Let them understand why this happened. On every surviving Arxen ship, displays activated with a simple message. You assumed order meant strength. You never considered that chaos could be wielded with precision. This is humanity's gift to the galaxy, the end of your perfect pattern. As the fourth hour of battle began, the outcome was no longer in doubt. The Arxen fleet, the most powerful military force the galaxy had ever seen, had been systematically dismantled by an enemy they had dismissed as primitive. The Coalition forces, who had been ordered to hold their positions and observe, were witnessing the impossible. Humanity, the species that had seemed so cautious and reserved, had been concealing a military capability beyond anything they had imagined. And they had done it not through superior numbers or brute force, but through careful study, meticulous planning, and the brilliant exploitation of enemy weaknesses. The perfect geometric patterns of the Arxen were being erased from the galaxy, replaced by the controlled chaos of humanity's combat doctrine. The art of war. The fifth hour of battle began with a sight unprecedented in galactic history. The proud Arxen fleet, reduced to scattered groups of surviving ships, fighting not for victory, but for survival. Their perfectly ordered battle formations had dissolved into desperate individual attempts to escape the human onslaught. Admiral Voss watched the tactical display with the detached interest of a scientist observing an experiment's predicted outcome. Begin containment procedures, she ordered. No Arxen ship leaves this sector. The human fleet moved with orchestrated precision, their asymmetrical vessels forming an ever-tightening net around the remaining Arxen ships. But unlike the rigid geometric patterns of their adversaries, humanity's formation was fluid, adaptive, constantly shifting to counter any attempt at breakthrough. Supreme Commander Crix, his crystalline form showing stress fractures from the constant resonance attacks, faced a reality his species had never contemplated: total defeat. How? He transmitted on an open channel. You were nothing. Primitive. Weak. We were patient, Voss replied, allowing the transmission to reach all surviving ships. While you saw our caution as weakness, we studied every aspect of your civilization. Your technology, your tactics, your psychology. You made it easy for us. You never changed, never adapted, never questioned your own superiority. The human fleet's AI tactical systems had already predicted 7 possible escape vectors the remaining Arxan ships might attempt. Quantum-linked drone swarms moved to cover each possibility, their resonance weapons primed. In the Coalition Command Center, Zenthor and other alien representatives watched in stunned silence as humanity demonstrated warfare on a level they had never imagined. It wasn't just the advanced technology. It was the integration of multiple strategies, the perfect coordination, the ability to predict and counter every Arxan move. Your entire society is built on patterns, Voss continued, her voice carrying across the battlefield. Patterns in your technology, your strategy, your thought. But patterns can be analyzed, predicted, and broken. That was humanity's real weapon, not our ships or our technology, but our understanding of you. As if to demonstrate her point, 3 Arxan cruisers attempted a desperate breakthrough, their crystalline hulls vibrating as they pushed their engines beyond safe limits. Before they could cover half the distance to the hyperspace boundary, human drones swarmed them from multiple vectors, their resonance weapons finding the exact frequencies needed to shatter the stressed crystal structures. How many simulations? Crix demanded, his transmission showing signs of increasing desperation. How long did you plan this? Millions of simulations, Voss replied calmly. 50 years of preparation. We knew this day would come from the moment we first encountered your empire. We saw what you were, not just your strength, but your fundamental weakness. Your inability to conceive of warfare beyond your perfect patterns. The human fleet's operation was entering its final phase. Special operations teams, their neural interfaces allowing them to process battlefield data in real time, began boarding selected Arxan vessels. They moved through the crystalline corridors with practiced efficiency, their weapons calibrated to the exact frequencies needed to breach internal barriers without compromising hull integrity. This isn't just defeat, Voss continued, her words now reaching every ship and command center in the sector. This is education. The galaxy needs to understand why you failed. Your empire was built on the assumption that order and pattern were the ultimate expression of power. Humanity is proving otherwise. In the Coalition Command Center, General Chen arrived via quantum teleporter to brief the assembled representatives. What you're witnessing, he explained, is the culmination of Project Mirror. While the Arxan were conquering through brute force, humanity was developing an entirely new form of warfare. We didn't try to match their strength. We learned to turn it against them. The tactical displays showed the final stages of the battle. Human ships had herded the remaining Arxan vessels into a containment zone, where specialized energy fields prevented both escape and communication with the broader empire. The once mighty fleet was now effectively imprisoned in a cage of humanity's making. Your empire will fall, Voss transmitted to Crix, not through the kind of wholesale destruction you practiced, but through the systematic dismantling of every assumption and pattern it was built upon. We've already transmitted the frequencies needed to disrupt your crystalline technology to every world you've conquered. Your colonies are already rising up, using our methods to shatter your control. The final hour of the battle was not marked by dramatic explosions or heroic last stands, but by the methodical completion of humanity's strategic victory. Special operations teams secured critical Arxan databases, AI systems cataloged and analyzed captured technology, and quantum-encrypted transmissions spread the knowledge needed to defeat Arxan forces throughout the galaxy. The age of the perfect pattern is over, Voss announced on all frequencies. The galaxy will learn to embrace adaptation, change, and the controlled use of chaos as strength. This is humanity's gift to the stars. In his rapidly disintegrating command center, Supreme Commander Crix received one final transmission, a comprehensive analysis of every flaw in Arxan military doctrine, every weakness in their technology, and every blind spot in their strategic thinking. It was humanity's final lesson to their defeated enemy, a demonstration that true power came not from rigid adherence to patterns, but from the ability to understand, adapt, and overcome. Echoes of victory. The news of the Arxan fleet's defeat spread across the galaxy at quantum speeds, but understanding traveled more slowly. On 1,000 worlds, beams of all species gathered around information terminals, watching and rewatching the battle footage, trying to comprehend how humanity had accomplished the impossible in mere hours. Admiral Voss stood before the Coalition Emergency Council 2 days after the battle, her uniform pristine, her expression composed. The chamber, designed to accommodate representatives of 17 species, hummed with barely contained energy. "You had this capability all along," said the Meridian delegate, their bioluminescent patterns showing agitation. "While we fought and died, while worlds burned, you watched and waited." "We prepared," Voss corrected quietly. "Every coalition defeat, every lost battle, every conquered world, all of it provided data. We needed to understand the Arxan completely before we struck. A partial victory would have been worse than defeat." The Council Chamber's adaptive environmental systems struggled to maintain balance as representatives from vastly different species expressed their emotions in their own ways. Some released pheromones of confusion or anger, others generated electromagnetic pulses of disbelief, and a few simply sat in stunned silence. General Chen stepped forward, activating a holographic display that filled the chamber. "This is what you don't yet understand," he said, gesturing to the complex web of interconnected data points. "The Arxan's defeat wasn't just military. We've initiated a cascading collapse of their entire empire." The display showed hundreds of Arxan-controlled worlds where the formerly subjugated populations were rising up, armed with the resonance frequency data that humanity had distributed. Crystalline control centers were shattering. Communication networks were failing, and the rigid hierarchy that had maintained imperial control was dissolving. "Your victory is spreading like a virus," observed the Ilari representative, their ethereal features showing the first hint of hope in decades. "Exactly like a virus," Voss confirmed. "We designed it that way. The Arxan Empire wasn't just defeated, it's being transformed. Their fundamental weaknesses are now common knowledge, their technological advantages neutralized, their psychological control broken." The holographic display shifted to show the captured Arxan command ships, where human synopsychologists were already working with the defeated warriors. "Even now, we're helping them understand their own rigid patterns of thought, teaching them to adapt, to think beyond their crystalline symmetry. You're rehabilitating them." The question came from a shocked coalition military commander. "We're evolving them," Chen corrected. "The Arxan aren't evil. They're trapped in patterns of thought and behavior as rigid as their crystalline technology. Breaking those patterns isn't just about military victory. It's about preventing the rise of similar empires in the future." The implications began to dawn on the council members. Humanity hadn't just won a war. They had fundamentally changed the balance of power in the galaxy. But they had done it without destroying their enemies, without seeking revenge for conquered worlds, without becoming the very thing they had fought against. "But what about humanity's power?" asked a nervous representative from a newly liberated world. "You've demonstrated military superiority beyond anything we imagined. How do we know you won't become the next Arxan?" Voss smiled, activating another holographic display. This one showed the human ghost fleet, but with a level of technical detail that made several council members gasp. "Because we're giving it all away," she said simply. "The technology, the tactical analyses, the psychological insights, everything we developed to defeat the Arxan will be shared with the Coalition." "Why?" demanded the Meridian delegate. "Because the greatest pattern that needs to be broken is the cycle of empires," Chen explained. "For too long, The galaxy has swung between chaos and rigid order, between freedom and dominion. Humanity's gift isn't just the defeat of the Arxen. It's the knowledge needed to prevent any species from achieving that kind of dominance again. The council chamber erupted in discussion, but Voss and Chen had already made their point. Screens around the chamber showed the ongoing transformation. Arxen warriors learning to think beyond their crystalline patterns, liberated worlds establishing new forms of government, coalition species beginning to adapt human tactical innovations to their own military doctrine. There will be challenges ahead, Voss addressed the council. The power vacuum left by the Arxen won't fill itself. But humanity isn't interested in replacing one empire with another. We're interested in building something new. A galaxy where adaptation and understanding are valued above strength, where diversity is recognized as an advantage rather than a weakness to be corrected. A quiet had fallen over the chamber as the representatives began to understand the full scope of humanity's vision. They had expected Earth to claim dominion after their victory, to establish themselves as the new power in the galaxy. Instead, humanity was offering partnership, sharing their advantages, and working to prevent the rise of future empires. The real victory, Chen concluded, isn't in defeating the Arxen. It's in ensuring that their fall marks the end of an era, the end of empires built on rigid patterns and enforced conformity. The galaxy is ready for something new, something more adaptive, more inclusive. As the council session ended, representatives filed out in thoughtful silence. Many had arrived angry at humanity's long deception, others fearful of their demonstrated power. They left understanding that they had witnessed not just the end of the Arxen Empire, but the beginning of a new approach to galactic civilization. Dawn of adaptation. 1 year after the 5-hour war, the galaxy had changed beyond recognition. The crystalline monuments of Arxen dominion had been repurposed into centers of learning, where beings from across the stars studied humanity's principles of adaptive warfare and flexible governance. The rigid patterns that had defined galactic civilization for centuries were giving way to something new, something dynamic. Admiral Voss stood at the viewport of Harmony Station, a massive structure built at the site of humanity's historic victory. Below her, ships of all species moved in organized chaos, their paths following no fixed pattern but flowing with remarkable efficiency. It was a living symbol of the new order humanity had helped create. The latest reports from the Arxen rehabilitation worlds are encouraging, General Chen said, joining her at the viewport. Their younger generation is already showing remarkable creativity. Some have even started creating asymmetrical crystal art. Voss smiled at the significance of this seemingly small detail. Breaking patterns starts with the ability to see beauty in imperfection, she observed. How are the coalition worlds adapting to the new defense protocols? Better than expected. The concept of flexible response was difficult for some to grasp at first, but the results are undeniable. The latest joint exercises showed a 300% improvement in tactical adaptation. The station's quantum communications array hummed constantly, coordinating the massive effort of rebuilding and reformation. But unlike the rigid control of the Arxen era, this coordination was based on voluntary cooperation and shared understanding. A holographic display activated, showing Zenthor, now serving as the head of the newly formed Galactic Adaptation Council. Admiral, General, you'll be pleased to know that the last of the Arxen holdout fleets has requested integration into the new system. They were convinced not by force, but by the evident success of their transformed brethren. This was perhaps humanity's greatest victory, not the military triumph, but the cultural transformation they had initiated. The Arxen, once symbols of unbending order, were becoming advocates for change and adaptation. Have you seen the latest innovations from the joint development projects? Chen asked, bringing up another display. It showed ships that combined multiple species technologies in ways that would have been unthinkable a year ago. Crystalline hulls that could alter their structure, organic computing systems that adapted to changing conditions, weapons that could modify their output based on tactical necessity. We gave them the tools, Voss said, but they're creating things we never imagined. That's the point. True strength comes from combination and adaptation, not rigid adherence to a single pattern. The station's observation deck had become a meeting place for representatives of all species. Currently, a group of former Arxon warriors was engaged in tactical discussions with coalition strategists, their crystalline forms reflecting the light in patterns that would have once been considered heretically irregular. There are still challenges, Chen acknowledged. Some worlds are struggling with the transition. The freedom to adapt means the freedom to make mistakes. That's why we're not leaving them to face it alone, Voss replied. Humanity's role isn't to rule or to enforce, but to guide and support. We learned that watching the Arxon's failures. A delegation of young aliens entered the observation deck, students from the newly established Academy of Adaptive Strategy. They represented dozens of species, including some that had been mortal enemies just a year ago. Now they studied together, learning not just military tactics but the principles of flexible thinking and creative problem-solving that humanity had demonstrated. Admiral, one of the students, a young Arxon whose crystal structure showed deliberate irregularities, approached. We've been studying the 5-hour war. There's something we don't understand. You had the power to end the war much earlier. Why wait so long? Voss considered the question carefully. Because winning the war was never our primary objective, she explained. We could have defeated the Arxon military, yes. But that would have just continued the cycle. One empire falling, another rising to take its place. We needed to change the way the galaxy thinks about power and civilization. By showing that true strength comes from adaptation rather than dominance, the student concluded, their crystalline form shifting in what had become the new Arxon expression of understanding. Exactly, Chen confirmed. Look around you. A year ago, this station would have been impossible. Different species, different technologies, different philosophies, all working together not through force or fear, but through understanding and mutual benefit. The viewport displayed a sudden flash as a new ship emerged from hyperspace, one of the first vessels produced by the Joint Species Engineering Project. Its design defied traditional classification, incorporating elements from a dozen different cultures into something entirely new. That, Voss said, gesturing to the ship, is the future we fought for. Not a human future, not an Arxon future, but one we're all creating together. The 5-hour war wasn't just about defeating an enemy. It was about opening the door to possibilities that no single species could achieve alone. As the sun set on another day in the new galaxy, the observation deck filled with beings of all species, each contributing their unique perspectives to the ongoing conversation about the future. The rigid patterns of the past had given way to a dynamic, adaptive civilization that celebrated diversity while maintaining harmony. Humanity had shown the galaxy a new way forward, not through domination but through understanding. The 5-hour war had ended one chapter in galactic history, but more importantly, it had begun another. An era where strength came from adaptation, power from cooperation, and victory from the ability to embrace change. In the end, humanity's greatest weapon hadn't been their technology or their tactics, but their fundamental understanding that the universe wasn't meant to be confined by perfect patterns. It was meant to evolve, to adapt, to grow. And now, at last, the galaxy was growing together. The end.